I love dragons and death, 'cause they are fun.
Hey, this is chapter 18, Catelyn 3 of Tory Survives Game of Thrones, a blind reading and abridgment of the Song of Fire and Ice books. First things first, before I get into anything, if you remember when I was being Ned and I was being the Hand, I kept clipping my hand and it kept falling, and I said maybe I'm not worthy to be the Hand. I got a package from one of my followers, and they actually sent me, check this out, it's a pin for the actual hand of the king, and that made my day. I know it sounds weird, like, dude, you got 100 subscribers, why are you getting presents? But it's important to know I actually have about 12,000 followers across all my different platforms, and I believe one of my TikTok followers sent it. But there was no note, so thank you, I love you. Mwah. All right, now let's get into this abridgment. Now, this chapter has a lot of world building in it, so we're gonna don our Professor Tory glasses, Professor of Lore and World Building. Okay, so we're arriving at King's Landing, and the brief history of King's Landing and general layout is that quite a while ago, when Aegon, first came up on the shores, there was barely like a couple of fishing people in the bluff, and there was 3 giant hills, and that was it. And Aegon picked the biggest hill, and he's like, that's where I'm gonna build my redoubt. And he did. Now current day, like, going up, you have the 3 main hills. I might get the names wrong, but there's Vicennis, which is kind of the smallest hill, and that has the Sept to Baelor on it, and it's surrounded by the 7 crystal towers. So I think that might tie in with the 7-faced god, like that Catelyn worships, and not the old gods like they worship in the north. Now, then there's the Street of the Sisters, which is like a completely straight road, and that separates Vicennis, from Rhaenys, which is another giant hill, and that has the dragon pits, but they're in a lot of disrepair. Like the dome is fallen in, and the giant bronze doors have stayed shut. I'm guessing because there haven't been dragons around for like 150 years. And then on the biggest hill, like the tallest one, I don't know if it's called like Aegon's Hill, but it's kind of referred to like that. That is where the Red Keep is, and the Red Keep is giant. It's made of like kind of light red or pink stone, and it's walled as well. Like the entire city has a giant wall around it, and then the keep has its own wall with like archer arrows, and there's barracks and everything you could think of for a keep, and Aegon the Conqueror actually commanded that it be built, but he died before it was finished. It was taken up by Maegor Targaryen, his son, who was also known as Maegor the Cruel. And I don't know exactly how he earned the title, but this might be it, because apparently he had it built and then got all the stonemasons, the carpenters, and everyone who worked on it, and executed them. So only the blood of the dragon would know the secrets of the Red Keep, which heavily implies that there's secret tunnels. So I think there's like lost secrets all over the keep. At least that's the way I'd like to think about it, because currently there's Baratheon banners all over it. So most of the people who would know those secrets, I don't think they're around anymore. But anyway, there's that. Basically what happened was the city exploded all over itself. It's huge, it's bustling. There's like inns and taverns and graveyards and granaries just everywhere, like scattered. And like it wasn't super planned. Like the alleyways are super inconsistent. Like some are just turning every which way, and other ones are so narrow, like only one person could walk through the alley at the same time. On top of that, there's a giant harbor that just has tons of traders and stuff. They mention there's ships from like Bravos and Pentos and Lys from the Free Cities. They mention a whaler ship from someplace I can't remember the name of, and I'm sorry for that, but it's like a flat bottom tarred out whaler ship even. There's this high-masted swan ship leaving for the Summer Isles. Yeah, and it's important to note there's a whole bunch of warships just docked there, waiting for a fight, basically. And they got like big iron rams sitting, and you can hear the fish market, everything. Like it's pandemonium. There's this giant city, think like it's sprawling. There's business everywhere. And then there's also mention of Tyrosh, which, if you remember, Mormont got exiled for selling poachers to slavers, the Tyroshi slavers. And apparently they're known for being greedy, like their avarice. So the only other place mentioned, and this is where we're going to pick up the actual plot, is White Harbor. And I guess it's over by the Three Sisters and the Fingers. And that was where Catelyn and Roderick were heading, to get to King's Landing before Roderick's before King Bobby's procession and the royal family and everything, because they're trying to get there first. And it kind of starts after they leave, but what happens is, someone tries to kill Bran. They're like, we got to talk to the Master of Arms at King's Landing because this dagger is one of a kind. It's Valyrian steel. It has dragon bone. Like, someone owns this, and he would know who, and he's trustworthy enough. So they take off by horse, just the two of them, and they're just breaknecking down to White Harbor. And when they get there, she's like, I need to find the fastest ship on this port. And it's the Storm Dancer. It's a little galley ship. It's got about 60 oarsmen. And the Captain Moreo, I believe. Don't come for me. He's Tyroshi. And Roderick is a little iffy about doing business with the Tyroshi. So he's like, let's get like a fishing sloop instead out of the Three Sisters. And Catelyn isn't having it. She's just like, yo, I need to get King's Landing as fast as possible. And Captain Moreo is like, I got you, So they're going, and I guess that was the right pick because the wind was against them the entire time. But these oarsmen, they're just going, right? And Roderick is having the worst trip of his life, kind of like Bran saw. They hit that storm nobody saw coming. He goes over the side. He's hanging by ropes. They pull him in. They pull him down. He's just getting seasick constantly. It gets so bad to the point one of the crewmen just shaves his face for him, because he can't keep cleaning his beard from tossing his cookies like constantly. Catelyn, I guess she's having a pretty uneventful trip, except her hands keep hurting, you know, and she's anxious. She wants to get there, but they're making record time, you know, like like the oarsmen and everything, to the point where the captain walks out. He's like, hey, we're almost there. And she's like, nice. You know, I'm gonna give every one of these oarsmen a silver piece, which is pretty considerable, you know, for like how hard they went and stuff. And he's like, oh, you know, ferrying a noble is like its own reward. And she's like, they'll still take the silver though, right? and he's like, yeah, you know. And I guess Tyroshi really like super bright colors. So like he has like a green dyed beard, and it's like forked, you know what I mean, and stuff. And he's wearing like big, you know, loud colors. And as they're coming up, Roderick walks out, and Catelyn's like, hey, we're almost there. And Roderick is trying to have a sense of humor about how bad, and he's like, oh, already? You know, like, which was kind of cute, because like he's standing there, his face is totally shaved, he's like lost weight from how much he's been tossing his cookies, and he says as much. He's like, I guess I haven't been much of a valiant defender, you know. And she's like, we got there safe, like, don't worry about it, that's all that matters. But while they're kind of pulling in and it's going into view, he's like, I was thinking about it, and you can't be walking around, like, there's people at court that'll definitely recognize you and like spot you if you go anywhere near the castle. And that's when they start talking about Littlefinger again. Remember I said, like, with a name like that, he's probably a gangster. Well, it turns out he's not just a gangster. And he is a kingpin. He's not the hand of the king, but he ended up as the master of coin, you know. So he's straight up pinned by the king. He's in a small council, and you know, Catelyn is like, yeah, I always knew he'd do pretty good. He's clever. Like, I don't know if he's wise, but he's clever. And you know, Roderick is like, yeah, about that. And she's like, I grew up with him. Like, she just throws formality to the wind. And she's like, and I thought of him like a brother. He thought of me as something more, you know? And she says, you know, like, when I was initially betrothed to Brandon Stark, you know, Ned's older brother, he actually challenged for my hand. And he was only 15, like Brandon was 20 and huge. So I guess Brandon, she had to beg Brandon not to kill him. And he scarred him. He left him with the scar. And that was it. Then Catelyn's dad was like, well, I can't have this drama, because he was a ward at River Run, and he just shipped him out. It was just like, and bye, right? And then when Brandon died, I guess he wrote her a letter, and Catelyn just sent out right to the junk pile, the junk crows, you know, section, because she just burned it unread, because she knew, like, she was gonna have to marry Ned instead. But I guess they haven't really talked since then, you know. And like that, they kind of finished that up. And he's like, well, I'll go. And she's like, you're in danger too, they'll recognize you. And he's like, nobody's seen me without a beard since my mom, and she died 40 years ago. You know, like, I think I could pass, you know. So I guess that's the idea. And then they turn to Captain Morale, and they're like, he's like, hey, you know, we'll get you right up to the Red Keep and carry your stuff. And, you know, they're docking the ship, and she's like, oh, we're not going to the Red Keep. Do you know, like, a good inn kind of close to the river? You know, and he's like, oh, yeah, I know the best place, but before you get off the boat, if I can be so bold, there's a matter of the second half of the payment for the journey, and the extra 60 silver. And Catelyn's like, that's for the oarsman. And he's like, I was thinking about that, and what if I hold on to it? Because if you give it to them here, they're just gonna play dice and go get some pleasure. And some of these guys got wives and kids, and it's kind of a fun exchange, because Roderick's like, there's worse things to spend money on. And Catelyn's like, I'm not the morality police, okay? They did an extra good job. I'm gonna give it to them. And she doesn't trust the captain enough, so she goes and gives each one a silver piece. Like, hey, good job, live your life. And then she tips out like 2 guys, because they carry the chest and stuff, like a copper piece each. So for oarsmen, they're making some decent money on this trip. And it's kind of fun, because the captain says looks real kind of ramshackle and stuff, and it's run by this old crone who's got like a wild eye. And as soon as Catelyn tries to give her a silver piece for the room, she like bites it to make sure it's real. But the captain's like, she's got the most savory fish stew, and it turns out like the rooms are actually pretty airy and stuff, so it's serviceable. And they're like, all right, bet. Roderick is like, hey, you gotta stay away from the common room though, because you don't know who's watching. And she's like, okay, well, you handle your biz, I guess, and then I'm gonna take a nap, because she's getting a little older. It's been a long trip. She just, she wants to take a nap. And Broderick, he changes out his armor, is like wearing like ringmail, like a little cloak, and he's like, okay, and disappears. Well, there's this huge knock on her door, and she realizes she slept almost till sunset. And it's like, open up in the name of the king. And she's like, crap. And like, she's grabbing stuff, and she's got like a dagger in her hand and stuff, and she opens the door, because she thinks something happened to Roderick. Like, she's like, this happened too fast, right? And it's a soldier. It's the city guard. They wear like black and gold, so like you can spot them. It's a city guard, and he's like, no need for that. Like, because he like smiles when he sees her with her dagger. And he's like, I've been sent to take you, to the Red Keep and stuff. And she's like, on whose authority? And he shows her like a little ribbon, and sure enough, it's got a little mockingbird, like gray mockingbird on the ribbon. And that's Littlefinger, right? So Littlefinger spotted her almost immediately, and they like take her through while everybody's like lighting the lamps and stuff. So it's kind of the cover of darkness ish. And she opens into Littlefinger's like little study, and he's sitting there alone at his desk and everything. And he's like, oh, Catelyn. And he's like being too friendly, like pretending like they're best friends or whatever. And Catelyn's not having it. So she's like, you just summon me like a wench now, like sending guards. And he makes like this little sheepish face, like, I'm sorry if I offended you. But she knows, like, he's always been slick, and like growing up, every time he tried to pull something and he got caught, he'd make that same like face, like, oh, So she's like, I know who you are, But he's like, I hope you weren't mistreated. I gave very specific orders. And he's like, oh my God, your hands. Because, the first thing she does is she washes and rebandages her hands before she leaves. And she just ignores the part about the hands and everything. And she's like, how did you know I was here? And he's like, well, that was Viserys, which, if you remember, Viserys was the eunuch that was mentioned by King Bobby about like his spy master kind of thing. and stuff. And she's like, oh, so the spider got me. And he winces a little bit, and he's like, don't say that around Viserys. You know what I mean? Like, he's very sensitive. I think it's because he's a eunuch or whatever, but apparently calling Viserys the spider is a no-no and will hurt his feelings. But, you know, he basically mentions about, like, he has little birds that say stuff, and he knows everything. And he knew she was coming, but he doesn't know why. And Littlefinger is like trying to be conspiratorial and pretend like he's buddies with her. So he's like, you know, I wanted to meet with you first, you know, in case, because it sounds like an emergency's happening. And Catelyn tries to bluff him. She's like, you know, you can't fault the wife for missing her husband or wanting her daughters around. And he's like, I know you too well, though. Like, and he recites like the Tory thing. It's like family, duty, honor. And he's like, all the family, duty, and honor would have been in staying. So something happened. And she's like, I hate this little, you know, and stuff. And he's like, please, if there's anything I can do, I beg you, let me help. You know, because, like, I guess he's trying to get in on her good side, and she's not really having it. And then that's when Viserys shows up, and he's standing in the chamber with her and stuff, and he's like, oh my gosh, your hands. Like, the first thing he mentions, he drops any of it, and he's like, did you get burned? Like, can I summon a salve for you? Or, you know, and she's like, Maester Lewin got it. Like, I'm treated and stuff. And then the very next thing he says is, you know, I was so sorry to hear about Bran. Just say the word. There's miracle healers over in the free cities. I'll summon one immediately for Bran. You know, like because he says, like, you know, the gods are unfair, and she kind of agrees and stuff, but see, she doesn't want to open up or show grief or anything because she barely trusts Littlefinger, and she definitely doesn't trust Viserys. So she's playing all of her, she's playing the Stark card, you know, like just everything in the best. So he's like, oh, well, there is one more thing. And she's like, what? And he's like, can I see the dagger? And she's like, the freaking spider, right? Like, how the hell does he even know there's a dagger? And her first instinct is, what did you do to Roderick? You know, because she's figuring, like, that's the only way he would have known. And he's like, oh, Roderick is fine. Nobody's done anything to him. He showed up. He talked to Sir Aaron, who's the master at arms at King's Landing. They went back to the inn. They're currently sitting there wondering where you are, and he's kind of distressed. And she's like, how do you know this? And he's like, oh, little birds told me, you know. And he's being kind of aloof. So she's like, so she like kind of pulls out the dagger, and he's messing with it, and he like cuts himself, you know, a little bit on his thumb, and he's like, ooh, and like drops it back on the table. And then Littlefinger picks it up, and he is like flipping it around and stuff. And I'm pretty sure it was him. I'm not sure if it was him or Viserys, but they just throws it and chucks it like kind of perfectly, and it like sinks really deep in the door and stuff. And he's like, if you wanted to know about the dagger, you could have just come to me. And she's like, what do you know about it? And stuff. And Viserys is like, there's only one dagger like that in all of King's Landing, and I know exactly who it belongs to, or whose it is. And she's like, who? And Littlefinger is actually like, mine. And she's like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, you weren't even in Winterfell, you know. And they kind of continue on, and they're like, at least until Joffrey's birthday. And Littlefinger kind of tells her, he's like, see, at Joffrey's birthday there was a jousting tournament, and I bet on Jaime Lannister to win. So when Sir Tyrell, you know, the House Tyrell, unhorsed Jaime, a lot of people got broke. The queen lost this giant emerald necklace. Jaime lost like 100 dragons, because I guess it's gold dragons and silver starks. I don't know what they call the pennies, but like the coppers. But and I lost my knife. And he's like, the queen, got her necklace back, but a lot of people lost some money. And she's like, to who? And Viserys says, to the imp, right? So I guess the dagger changed hands to Tyrion Lannister, and it's Tyrion Lannister's dagger. But I have a big problem with this, because the imp spends all his time sharpening his mind like a whetstone, and he's supposed to be super tricky and aloof and hard to pin down and extra smart. Why would he give his one-of-a-kind, very traceable dagger to a hitman, to kill Bran? He could have given him a normal dagger. It's not like Bran is specifically myths and legends material. He's a 7-year-old kid in a coma, right? So it feels to me like maybe there's some convoluted thing where he was trying to set up, like Littlefinger, but I don't buy it. What I really think happened was, and this is blind guessing, so if I'm off, just laugh about it. Don't correct me, because I'm still reading. But I think that Cersei put the hit and then used Tyrion's dagger because she don't like Tyrion. You know what I mean? Because I don't think Jaime would set up the imp, and of the people who would definitely put a hit on Bran, it's got to be Jaime or Cersei, right? And I think Cersei thinks she can handle the imp and Bran in one fell swoop, because it felt so planted. It was just so blatantly done. But that's my theory anyway. That is the end of chapter 18, Catelyn 3. I'm Tory Torrential. This is Tory Survives Game of Thrones, and I love you. Also, thanks for the hand of the pin. That was really touching.
Thanks for watching my show. Like and subscribe.